16.
IS 16.
Sorry.
IFRS 16 is useless.
But
Am I on these? I'm adopted. Am I on these? I'm adopted. Am I on these? I'm adopted.
Hi guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. I'm Slindo.
I'm Shalom.
And this is Not That Interesting. And we know it's been a while since we gave you guys a video. We've been quite busy with our auditing life. It's been up and down, but we are back. And yeah, I don't know about consistency.
Okay.
I want to promise you guys consistency,
But we're not gonna promise.
but we don't make promises. We're just gonna try. Yeah, so today we are taking the study tips video, the one that was requested by one of our subscribers, and we are going to dive into the big four modules of accounting and how you should approach each one. And yeah, so let's get into the video.
So when I started off with tax, we wrote down some notes. So if you guys see us looking down, please don't judge. So for me, when I started tax, one of the most important things was my flagging, because you always have to be referring back to your legislation when you're writing. So I flagged my ledge using color coding. So for example, I would flag my gross income with green, and then I would flag, for example, DCA with blue. And then another thing is that it's all good that you go into the exam with your legislation and stuff, but if you don't know what triggers a certain section, it doesn't help. So for example,
you could have like section 12H is your learnerships. So obviously as soon as they talk about learnerships, 24 months, you must know that, okay, it must be above 24 months. You must check for the dates. Things like that are triggered in the question.
okay, so guys, with that, it just helps you so that you're not paging through your legislation wasting time. So just at least know like a trigger of the, so you call it like the scope of the section. And then secondly, when you're answering, try to think of your scope, implication, and the conclusion. So you need to like write your scope. That's technically like coming from your legislation. Implication is you applying it to the scenario, and then your conclusion is obviously like you concluding. So if they ask, for example, a gross income, a deduction question, and then at the end you need to like say that this is going to be deducted. And then also like answer like you're telling, they always used to say it's a GG, answer like you're talking to a surgeon. So even like the dumbest things that you feel like any person would know, like what's a resident, like worldwide, like write it down, like literally write down your process, because there are marks on those things. And that brings me to my next point, which is a postmortem on your paper. So that's simply saying that after you write, you get your paper. Most processes
Reflection, go.
Reflection. What's another word for it? Reflection on your paper. So after writing, most of the processes give you your papers back, and then you have the memo. So go through pretty much what you wrote versus what the memo has to see where you are lacking, and that helps you. Like that's how you identify, oh no, I was never gonna write this, but it's actually important. So it's not that, sometimes it's not that you don't know things, you just feel like there's no need to write them. And then also with tax, it's like it's not a 50-50 with like your theory and your questions. So you sort of need to get comfortable with your theory first before you start doing questions. So practice your theory, and then only when you're comfortable with your theory do you now go do questions, because it's very, okay, in CTA at least, it's very theoretical. In undergrad, it's more question based, because they're asking like a lot of calculations, yeah. So you need to know, for example, gross income. What is the structure of a gross income calculation? So you need to know your theory is, but more often than not, they'll ask you for the calculation questions. And then also your case law, guys. Please study your case law, because those are like often easy marks, but we also don't study it. So if you can maybe like once a week just go through the case law so that it's fresh in your mind. You don't have to like dedicate like an entire day, but if you do it like religiously, then you sort of like gets into your brain faster, and you never have to take out time for it. And then that's pretty much it. Yeah, from my side.
Yeah, but also with tax, we need to keep in mind that with tax, I feel like it's one of the modules where they can literally test everything they taught you in the paper. So if the first if the first 7 weeks you were doing VAT, and then you did the gross income, and then you did DTA, they are going to find a way to put all of those sections that you studied in those 7 weeks in that one paper. So it's one of the modules where you know how you have your stronger points and then you have your weaker points. So if you know that VAT is more of your stronger point in tax, it's one of the papers where you are going to get some marks, or which you never know to what extent you're going to be able to test it to. That it's not that many marks, and that might be your downfall.
Also brings you down to the don't spot for the
Yeah.
exam. So it means that in tax you need to study pretty much everything.
So
Yeah.
you really need to know everything. And like Shalom said, with tax, it's never 50-50. With tax, what is in the edge is what is marked. There's no method marking. It's just you have to apply and you have to know what is in it. So what our lecturer used to always tell us is that you don't get marks for writing down the definition. As much as sometimes you may look at the solution for a paper and they probably wrote the definition down of what a general, what has a definition? They have a definition for resident. So you know how they have that 360 ordinary resident gain. They have a definition, but you don't get a mark for regurgitating the legislation. You need to, at the time when you are trying to explain the definition, at the same time apply, because tax is one of the longest papers you will write, and you need to time yourself, and you need to be able to get everything that you need to get down on paper in the time that is provided. So don't waste time regurgitating what is in the legislation, and just go straight to applying. Yeah.
Okay guys, module 2 is auditing. So auditing is very theory intensive in a way, but it's also like question based. But Cindy's gonna take us through the tips of how to study that and answer it as well.
Yeah, so guys, auditing is a bit tricky. Like she said, it's more theory. Actually, it's only theory. And the only calculation question you're ever gonna get is that PI score question for 10 marks, maybe even less. But yeah, so with auditing, there's the general things that you always need to have in your pocket. One, you need to be able to time yourself. There's a lot of writing that goes into auditing, so be able to time yourself. So if you know that you're a person who writes slow, I would advise that when you actually study and when you do your questions, write down your answers, time yourself, and then our tutor used to always say, draw a red line where the timer basically stops, or when the timer goes off, draw a red line, then continue answering the question, and then complete the question as a whole, and then when you mark, then go back and go above the red line is what you would have gotten in the exam, and then below the red line, although you might have gotten it right, but then because you weren't able to time yourself correctly, then you would have lost those marks. So it's important for you to assess yourself to see, would have I gotten it? Would have I not gotten it? How can I improve my time and how can I improve my writing? Because also with auditing, it's very important how you answer, because sometimes you can have the right answer, but it's not structured the way that they want it.
Yeah, true, because you can write a page and get 0, and then somebody can literally write like a paragraph. So it's not about how much are you writing, it's actually like, are you writing things that have substance in it? Yeah.
So yes, that's one. Practice time management, and practice is very important, guys. Don't even try to not practice for auditing. It's very important. Do your past papers, do as many as you can, and yeah, just get into practicing.
Yeah, and also like while you're practicing, note down like there's certain jargon, certain words you're supposed to use in auditing. So you can't say do, for example, you have to say perform. Like they're sort of like very petty with the way you answer your questions. So just pay attention to that as well, and that will build up over time as you practice more.
Yeah, and I think that covers also your exam technique at the same time, right?
Yeah, because you could study, like sometimes you know what you studied, but your exam technique isn't the best, so you end up like getting lower marks because of that.
Yeah, and also know your strengths and your weaknesses with auditing. Auditing is a broad module, as you know. You have your ethics, you have your ISAs, which then is an umbrella of things, your substantive, your test of controls, your assertions and everything. Yeah, everything falls under your ISAs. You know those 2 standards. So you need to know what you're good at. So if you know that you are more of an ethics girly or an ethics boy, so if you know that when it comes to ethics, you know that you are that girl or you are that boy, start with that question, invest time into that question so that you maximize.
But still keep your allocated time.
Yeah, still keep your allocated time, but obviously maximize. Yeah, but just know your strengths, know your weaknesses. So if you know that a question that you know really well came out, start with that question, maximize your marks. You might not get the full marks, but you will get the majority of the marks that you need, and then you can just top up with the other questions. Right.
Yeah, also on exam technique. So you do practice, yes, and obviously as you practice, you pick up certain trends. But please don't try, like they say, it's fine to cram, but don't cram and try to force whatever you crammed into the scenario. So I think that's like, I used to low-key cram auditing, but that's the difference between like the people that cram and pass and the people that cram and fail. Because when you cram and pass, it's that thing of, yes, I crammed the way I ordered PPE, or I crammed controls and stuff. But when a scenario comes, think, is what I crammed really applicable to a scenario? So don't just force things into it as well. So that's very important. Please look at context, because it's a lot about application. As much as it's a lot of theory, it's are you applying it right, like we said.
Yeah. And auditing is very repetitive, guys. So the more questions you do, the better it is for you, especially on the topics that you are struggling with. Yeah, and then like we said, your audit is separated into your ethics and then your ISAs. So with your ethics, it's more your just like tax, it's everything that you can find in the standard. Your is it
CPCs?
Yeah, it's the CPC, the Companies Act, your AP Act. What else is there?
All those.
The general rules, all of those. So guys, with CPC, the easiest trigger you can find for CPC, as soon as they say you are a CASA, or whenever they say someone is a CASA, just know because it also depends on how they ask the question. Sometimes they are not specific on what is, I don't know how to ask questions, guys, but sometimes they will like directly point you to Companies Act, and then sometimes they will say, when they want an overall on all the ethics, as in bringing all the Companies Act and whatever not, they will say, what would they say? Ethics. What are the ethical considerations? Yes, they will say, what are the ethical considerations do you have for who and who? So obviously, if you know that Shalom is a CASA, you now know that you need to apply CPC. If you know that in Shalom being a CASA, she's one of the shareholders in this company, it brings in Companies Act. if you know that obviously the AP Act is already, because she is an auditor, she's a registered auditor, that already comes in. But then the AP Act is normally more for the auditor side. So for when they say XYZ is being audited by ABC, so it's normally more for the APC side. But then obviously if she's also an auditor and also part of the company, she's still liable to like the what is this, the AP Act. Yes, she needs to this is
It pretty much comes back to that point which you also said in terms of know the triggers. Like it's a very dangerous game when you go like open book isn't as easy as it sounds, because you need to know the triggers. Like she said, like if they say ethics or if they say there's an auditor CA, you need to now know that like it triggers CPC. So is that it pretty much just comes back to that. Yeah, and also please remember, like there's the theory that we also did do in undergrad, like your ethical triangles and your moral but it's not legal, all of those things. So don't just like rely on your eyes as well. There's that theory that you also need to consider. And almost always they always ask an ethics question, like, and almost always the answer is that they're not ethical. So guys, please.
But then also don't always, like, yeah, she's right, almost always they are not ethical. But guys, I feel like the most important thing for exam technique, read the question. Because when they say, sometimes they will point you towards saying what are the weaknesses in the ethical, whatever not. Sometimes they're just going to give you a question where they say identify, I don't know how they put it, man, I forgot, but then it's when they want the good and the bad. They don't want you to
analyze, evaluate versus criticize.
Yes, so they want the good and the bad. So even the good that they are doing. So if they say that they are applying King 4 and they apply correctly, mention it and conclude with it. Oh yes, they are in adherence to King 4 by doing 1, 2, and 3. But anyway, moving on.
Okay, guys. So I'm gonna go into so the next thing is your substantives and your controls. So I just want to give you like tips and pointers on how to go about your substantive questions and also your control questions.
Girl, it's funny how you want to introduce things and not go into
so for your controls, I was never strong at controls, so I don't know why I'm going through this. But your controls, we said you have 3 main sort of questions that you get. So you have your test controls. So you're testing your controls. Then you also have design controls, which is literally you coming up with controls. And then you also have the weaknesses in the control. So that's a control is already designed, but answer how you can identify weaknesses. So with regards to that, Madam Control.
Okay, so when you are testing your controls, normally that's the type of question where you are going to read it and you are going to see what they're going to tell you. Oh, okay, 1, 2, and 3 did this. When they receive goods, Zbanibani will observe the picking list and then they will sign it. That is normally what your control question looks like. So like she said, with test of controls is when you have to basically test the control. Is the control effective? Is the control design effective? And is the control operatingness is it operating? Is it operating correctly? Is the control operating correctly? Yeah, guys, English is not my mother tongue.
So, for example, what you said about the picking list, and so if they say that the packer gets the delivery because delivery knows, and then they sign it as them having received it. So, for example, in your test of controls, you say that inspect the GRN for evidence of review. Mm-hmm. So whenever they say a signature, just always say like evidence of review, because sometimes you don't know how they'll say that somebody reviewed, but they won't say how they reviewed. So you always just want to like inspect it for evidence of review. That way you leave room for if it's a signature, if it's it could be anything. So that's pretty much it. Also with your controls, you never really have to like think about it when when they ask a test of controls question, because it's always you're literally redoing or rechecking. That's where your different sort of action words come in. You recalculate, reperform, inspect, observe.
Your auditor's toolbox, it's somewhere in your eyes.
Yeah, so those 5, it's 5 of them. That's when you start using those. So it's literally like you say, inspect this for that. But you just add inspect and sort of like you take whatever control they've said
Inspect
and then
the
you
delivery
answer
note
that.
for the signature of the manager as evidence of review.
Yeah.
That's your answer for a test of control. And mind you, sometimes there's a fine line between testing controls and substantive. Sometimes I feel like we struggle to answer that because I remember there was one question where we thought we were answering controls, but then our lecturer said we were leaning more towards the substantive more than testing of the controls. It must be doing something. For it to be a control, it must be detecting something or must be preventing something. And
Correcting.
Or it must be correcting. Detect, prevent, and correct. So also, like we said, there's two parts to a test of control. There's the design and then there's the operating effectiveness. So you must always think when you are structuring your answer, am I answering towards the design or the operating effectiveness of the control? Yeah.
And the last one is your weaknesses. So weaknesses is the same, it's similar to test of controls because already they have a control, so the control is outlined for you. You're just looking like what are the loopholes. So for example, they say that the packer that picks up the packer makes puts through the order. The packer is the one who signs off on the invoice. The packer is the one. So pretty much that thing of segregation of duties. So that's what. So they have a control. You just have to figure out like, are there any loopholes? So it's sort of like, I think for me, if I had to answer that question, it's sort of like put yourself in the shoes of the person who's doing the control of like, if I wanted to commit fraud, because remember we said what is to prevent, detect, and correct. So if I wanted to commit fraud or stop fraud, what would I do? So if I'm the person who's handling everything, obviously that creates room for a weakness. So think what could go wrong in a way, because in order to, when you're on the other side, you realize that like with your controls, you always have to think like what can go wrong, and what can go wrong is secondly your weakness in a way.
Yeah, but then I think that brings in that point. So if you're the same person who's signing the invoice, signing the picking slip, and signing the dispatch, that means the control is designed well because someone is taking accountability, but the operating effectiveness of the control is the problem. So you see.
So then we're gonna go into substantives, guys. Substantives. I used to cram for these, so.
Yeah, no, your substantives are not the one. They were my big weakness, especially that overall financial statement level question. Your assertions and overall financial statement level.
Okay, but on a real note. On a real note though, guys, so most important thing about your substantives is to keep your references in mind, because the way you do a calculation would literally...
Before you go to references, make sure that there's two ways, like we said, there's the overall financial statement and then there's the assertions. So the assertions falls into the one that she's talking about now. Yeah.
You see, she's the person who studied audits in company. I wanted to be out of it. But anyway, so your assertions, which deal with your balance sheet items, so you can always find those in your IFRSs. So for example, if they're asking you like substantive procedures for PPE, for example, you know to go to your standard page through to IFRS 16.
Yeah,
IFRS 16.
I go IAS 16.
Sorry.
IFRS 16 is useless.
Okay, so for example, if they're asking you PPE, you know to go into your accounting standards and you page up IAS 16. You know the components of IAS 16. It's your cost, it's your depreciation, your impairment, etc. So you already know how you would calculate it. So you sort of like coming now up with procedures of how would you audit the calculation. So for example, for depreciation, you request your depreciation calculation. You check, is it mathematically accurate? You check, did they use the right useful life? So think about it from an account, like with both your accounting and auditing hats. Yeah, so that's on substantives, and then also your 5 W's. So when you are, they always use in UJ, like when you're answering, you need to have your 5 W's in mind, which are
the who, the what, the when, the why, the how. I don't know.
Yeah. But you guys know the 5 W's. We'll list them, right? So it's to say that when you're structuring your procedure, you need to make sure that you're answering who is doing what, why are they doing it, when are they doing it. Answer at least 3, like at least 3. If you are that person, then you can, I guess, touch all 5, but at least 3. You need to structure your procedure in a way that nobody is able to ask why, when. Like, don't have your marker be like asking why, like asking further questions, because that means that you haven't put down your answer in a proper way, in a way.
Yeah, basically that's it. When they ask for the overall financial statement, it's when they want you to use your ISA 315, your ISA 330, your ISA 320, all those ones. It's where you have your signing of the audit letter. It's 320, right? Yeah, that one. Yeah, so with those questions are normally, they're half and half. They're sometimes easy. They are easy marks because the answers you find them in the ISA sometimes. Like I know that the 331, they'll ask you to what extent, maybe if it's a significant account, to what extent must you now audit the account, or what must you do to then ensure that this account is audited properly, like for revenue. So that's where they'll tell you about your appoint more senior members on the team, more experienced members on the team, the timing, when must you do it? Must you do it towards year end? Must you do it throughout the year? When is the test performed? That's when they want to hear all of those things. The responses, is just the responses. So that's the question, that's your 330. I feel like you can use your standard for those type of questions. And also for your risk of material misstatement, with that one, it's very hard, but then I think how I used to look at it, I think what helped me was practicing, honestly, I won't lie, because your risks never change, they always stay the same. If it's a big company, it increases the risk. If it's listed, it will increase the risk. If they have a new system that they implemented in that current year, it increases the risk. How does it increase the risk? Because the staff is not experienced. You need to look into all those key factors.
I think on ROM is also a thing of knowing the difference between your business risks and your audit risks. So the thing of I think they would say like not all business risks are audit risks. So with your ROM, we're concerned from an auditor's perspective, what are risks for us. So you can't say something that only affects the business. So if it doesn't affect the audit, then don't write it under your risk of material misstatement. So know that all audit risks are business risks, but not all business risks are audit risks.
Yeah. But it's also knowing the triggers mainly. Like if it's listed, what does it trigger?
Yeah, so that's why I was saying that with those type of questions, with the overall practice is always key, because those questions they don't change too much. They always be asked the same way.
See, that's why I said cry.
Don't cry, guys. Just know, like, your triggers, just know them down. Oh, okay, as soon as I hear this is what it's meant to trigger. And then the important thing is, after knowing your trigger, then answer correctly. Because you can't just know that, oh yeah, they listed, so it increases the risk. It increases the risk of material misstatement. Why? Why does it increase the risk of material misstatement?
Because audit is like that one module. If you can still ask why, know that you haven't answered.
You haven't answered the question.
Like if somebody can walk up to you and help you answer,
I get you, but why?
Then you haven't answered it. Yeah. So I guess in a way, like, write your answer, ask why, and only stop when you.
If you know that you've answered the why, know that you're good to go.
But what's then left, guys? That thing you're good to the assertions. If you're not scoped out, you need to talk to all of them.
Yeah.
So you talk to all the assertions, and then the general procedures for substantives. But then those ones tend to be scoped out.
Hope you guys enjoyed this video. We know, it might be a bit long, but please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you guys next time on our YouTube channel.